congratulations on last night.
Thank you.
Do you enjoy the whole hoopla of the ceremony and what goes with it and the spotlight?
It was very, very busy, obviously, and I was more just trying to survive during most of the event. But yeah, of course I enjoyed it, and I really didn't know what would happen. I wasn't expecting to win more than anybody else, I don't think. And I thought that it was probably unlikely, being that I had won the prize once before. So it really was quite a shock when that did happen. Yeah.
Do you get to keep it? If you win it a third time, do you get to keep it? Like the World Cup, you get to keep it?
I did actually wonder about that. I don't know.
Does it change, do you think, winning this? I mean, you've won it before, but do you think it does have an effect, the Mercury, in terms of changing just the general public's awareness? Do you think you'll get stopped in the streets of Charmouth or Lyme Regis?
I think I realise much more now, today, than for instance 10 years ago, the impact that it has. And I think the Mercury Prize has grown a lot in stature since then anyway. It's a much bigger event now. It's become greatly televised. I think it wasn't even televised in 2001. So, I mean, back then, and also because of what was happening, it didn't really register very much to me or anybody else, I don't think. But this time it's been overwhelming. The amount of people that have heard about me winning the prize last night has astonished me. I've just heard from friends all over the world that have heard about it, and I'm just so taken aback that they even knew.
Talk a bit, if you will, about the making of the record and the process behind it, because it's been described as a concept album about war. Did it begin as a kind of plan in your head, or was it more a collection of thoughts and feelings that sort of came together and coalesced into the record?
Well, I'd wanted to write such an album for years and years. I've always been extremely affected by what's going on in the world. I mean, at a very deep level, I find myself extremely upset many days by what's happening. And I think it's the nature of being an artist, and no matter what medium you work in, but you're very sensitive to what is happening, and you have to be, because you have to absorb things and articulate it and find a way of processing it, putting it out there again. So I knew that at some point I would want to start writing about these things that affect me so profoundly, things that are outside of my own small world but are out there and happening today. And I knew that I wasn't ready as a writer until this point in time. You know, literally 3 years ago, when I started writing Let England Shake, it was the first time that I felt I could try, because I'd reached a different level with my word writing, that I thought I might now have the skill with which to handle such language.
So is it a technical thing rather than, a technical part of the craft of songwriting almost, rather than an emotional maturity that you need to make that record?
It was a few things. It was knowing that I'd reached a different level technically, that I might be able to do it. It was also that personally I was feeling a much more urgent sense of needing to do it, and feeling so upset and sickened by so many things that were happening, and this sense of impotence that I couldn't do anything.
And when you talk about things upsetting you, I mean, I assume that to be war in Afghanistan, war in Iraq?
Well, just on a daily basis, every day, what we hear and see, what we read, and what's going on in the world, it's all so upsetting. And I felt that I wasn't doing enough on my part to actually put voice to these things. I didn't feel that I could find enough being said about it, particularly in my own avenue of work, which is songwriting. And thought I should address that and try and do something about it.
Mm-hmm. Presumably you were very conscious of the risk you'd run of people slagging you off, because whenever pop stars talk about politics, it can seem terribly glib, and it often seems contradictory that if you're some wealthy person who lives a sort of loose lifestyle, why should you be lecturing people about something you might not fully grasp? So how difficult was that to grapple with? I mean, that...
Well, again, I think I knew how I needed, or what I didn't want to do stylistically. I really wanted to avoid any sort of chest-beating, dogmatic protest music. that wouldn't have worked at all. And so it was a very difficult balance and a fine line to tread of producing something that still maintained a degree of ambiguity. I can say it. I wanted it to be sort of ambivalent, to not be clearly in one position or another, but just presenting, just storytelling, just this is what happened, which is also why I chose to come purely from what I'd call a human, emotional perspective rather than political. I didn't want to use political language or adopt any sort of standpoint. All I wanted to do was to listen very carefully to the words that came out of people's mouths that were involved in conflict situations, whether they were civilians or soldiers, and whichever side they were fighting on. And just listen closely to the language that they were using. What stories are they telling? What are they seeing? And that was how I began to make these songs.
Is the impression you get from that is that there are eternal truths in all of this stuff? I mean, an account of a war from Roman or Greek times, the same emotions or the same things that people experience as they do today?
That's what struck me the most, actually, is it's, as I would read even very ancient documents about war, I realised that the language is the same. The description of the suffering and the loss and the carnage and the waste, it's all the same. And that was quite shocking to me as well, because I just realised myself that it's not going to change. If it's been like this for this long, this is actually human nature. The way that we go on this endless cycle of attacking each other.
But there's quite a lot of evidence that suggests that we're becoming a less violent species, that fewer people actually do die in wars per head of population now than they did 2,000, 5,000, 20,000 years ago. So it can't all be doom and gloom.
No, it's not all doom and gloom, and I certainly don't feel that way either. I think of myself as I try to be an optimistic person and a hopeful person, and the way I tried to address that in this album was through the music. The words are very heavy going. When I'd finished writing them, I knew that wasn't the only perspective I wanted to present. So the music I tried to make as uplifting and beautiful and rousing as I could, and I wanted to make the music have a sense of unification, of bringing people together, of celebration, to offset this weight that was in the words. Yeah.
I was wondering last night, at the Mercury Prize, of the other nominees, whose music you like, which acts you like of that lot. I was trying to picture you dancing around the room to a bit of Katy B, or of the 11 other artists, who's most up your street?
I think everything. I really liked their performance last night. It was really unusual. I thought they were great. I do really love Adele's voice, I have to say. I really enjoy listening to her songs. And I find Anna Calvi really interesting. I think she's got a long way to go. I feel like she's an incredible musician and singer. And I think she'll really develop and keep finding new paths for herself. I hope so. And
as you were saying about the making of this record, that there aren't other people trying to address the outside world or what's going on in the world in the way that you've attempted to do so. But can you think of any examples? I mean, it seems to me that, there's a sort of Dylan comparison, that he spent a long time trying to erase himself. He burst into the scene in the 1960s, and he seems to have spent 40 years trying to tell people it's not about him and it's about the outside world and the work. But I don't know if there are other people that you look to for inspiration who are musicians in that similar way.
Well, Dylan, obviously. I mean, what he was doing in the early 60s was astonishing, but still now, I mean, I love reading his interviews. He speaks so well. Neil Young, I always follow what he's doing because he is forever experimenting, forever trying new things. And I think he's written some incredible songs. Patti Smith, whenever she's performing, I want to see her because she is so energising to see and so passionate with what she's doing and so wonderfully vocal and eloquent. Again, she's somebody that I think will just continue to to cut her path and to go after what she believes in until she drops. And that's inspiring. Yeah.
In terms of your research for this record, is there, I mean, if you could say to some sort of 16-year-old there was one film or one book about war that you read or watched that you found particularly inspiring or interesting, what would those be?
I think Stanley Kubrick. I watched almost all of his films. It might not seem like a direct link with this album at all, but it's something about what is not said in his films. There's so much space, there's so many things that are silent, and somehow in that space and silence everything becomes clear. He within every film he seems to capture the essence of life itself, particularly films like Paths of Glory, 2001, Barry Lyndon. They're some of my favourites. In fact, I drew a lot from film, a lot of Ken Loach's films as well, particularly The Wind That Shakes the Barley. Ari Folman's Waltz with Bashir, I remember being very affected by. And in all of these I was watching whilst writing this record.
And since the record's come out, I mean, it's been a ridiculous kind of summer of news, and as you say, things haven't got better. I mean, it's been one thing after another with the Arab Spring, which has been optimistic and hopeful, and I guess what's happened in Libya, but phone hacking as well, and now the riots. I mean, does it feel to you a sort of prescient record in that way?
It does. I feel that very much. It takes me back every night when I'm standing on stage and I'm singing these songs, and it's as if I'm singing about what I saw on the news that morning. You know, I've got a show tomorrow, and it'd probably feel the same. The songs seem to keep reinventing themselves to the news of the day, and that's a very unusual thing, and happens so rarely. It's the first time it's ever happened for me in that way. In some ways, the record doesn't feel like it is part of me at all. It feels like it just belongs to the moment that the world is in.